Hello, welcome to session 10. And we begin this time with Max Weber, our final founder of sociology. Max Weber lived from 1864 and died in 1920. Now, as usual, we'll do a brief biography, which I will not dwell with so much. But then we go on to consider his major ideas and all that, and his sociological contribution. Now, in English language, we will pronounce Max Weber as Max Weber. So, in English language, we will pronounce his name as Max Weber, but his name should be pronounced Weber because of German alphabetical way of saying things. So, it's Max Weber. He was German. And as I said earlier, Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber are the most influential founders. So Weber is interesting because his thinking about sociology is a bit strange, or rather different from his colleagues. The first thing Weber said was that sociology should study what he calls Verstehen, the understanding and thoughts of individuals, using the method he calls Verstehen. Now, that Verstehen is German concept. And so, literally, what Weber is trying to say is that, unlike Durkheim, who said we should study social facts, how society in a way influence our behavior, Weber is saying that we should literally like go into the minds of people to see what motives that they have which are determining their behavior. So that is a very important contribution. Now, Weber has a lot of concepts. So we have Verstehen, we have ideal type consent, we have value-free sociology, we have his ideas about evolution of society, authority patterns. He was interested in politics. He was interested in economic development and all that. So Weber was a historian as well. So he was eclectic scholar in the sense that he touched on many, many things, unlike the previous founders we discussed. So we're going to walk through all these ideas. And as usual, I trust that you fill in the gaps as we move on. Now, how do you explain human behavior, or how people act? Now, Weber defines human behavior directed towards any other person as social action. Okay, so you alone, you can't have social action, you alone. But once you relate to somebody, you have social action. Now, social action to Weber can be expressed in 4 forms. We have goal-oriented social action, value-oriented social action, affective social action, and traditional social action. Weber's idea is that our actions have certain orientations. For example, somebody will behave in a way just because traditional society or expectation decides that he or she should behave that way. That is traditional social action. Affective social action is where love, sympathy, and things drive our behavior. So, for example, a young girl who drops out of school because the mother is seriously ill and she has to take care of the mother. So that is affective sociality, even to the extent that people say, oh, then she didn't go to school, or she wasn't going to school. She has sacrificed her life for such a thing. Then we have the value-oriented. The value-oriented is some value that somebody has, and so is directing the social action to that, or his or her action to that. So, for example, the example that you have in your mood in the books, that the book that I recommended for you is somebody who will work very, very hard. Instead of using the money, spend his money on himself or herself, decides that you go and use all the money to give the pastor, because in his or her judgment, such actions may help her attain some value. So maybe through that, he or she will go to heaven. Then we have the other one, the goal-oriented action. That is, the action must be oriented towards the achievement of some goal, usually some benefit. Usually we have to be calculative. So if I have to engage in some activity or action towards somebody, and if I can't benefit from it, I will not do that. So throughout life, you see people behaving in this form or the other. Now, Weber's idea is that the whole process of evolution, from traditional society to the modern, which all the founding fathers have described in various ways, for him, is a movement towards, finally, a goal-oriented social action. So modernity, modern people, their behavior will be oriented towards goals rather than values, rather than affectivity, and rather than traditionalism. So Weber is trying to argue that in many traditional societies, people's action towards each other are either going to be determined by tradition, affectivity, or some value orientation. But modern societies, industrialized modern societies, most people's actions will be determined towards the achievement of a particular goal. So he came out with the concept that the whole world was moving from a situation where tradition, affectivity, values, and others are determining people's actions, to one that people's actions are going to be very, very rational. And so one basic concept that runs to Weber's work is rationalization. Rationalization here means the employment of calculation. The idea that I should make profit, I shouldn't lose. Okay, means ends calculation. So modern people are going to be oriented towards that kind of actions. Okay, so rationalization is going to be a key issue in Weber's work. So previously I said one theme that was uniting the works of Emile Durkheim was social solidarity or social integration. For Weber, is rationalization. Now, there are other concepts as well, which I think you can look at. I've talked about Westerhen, subjectivity, causality, and probability. These are issues or concepts that come under Weber's way of thinking about the methodology for sociology. He also talks about ideal types. Ideal types is a concept which sociologists often use. What it means is that, sociologists create concepts or ideas, and then they go out to the real world to examine whether the real world conforms to the features of those concepts or ideal concepts. So what he was meaning is that sociologists will often do that, because when we see concepts in their pure form, and then we go to the real world to examine whether the real world conforms to that, we can see how the real world deviates from the concept, and then we can know what really is pertaining in the real world. Now, he also came out with the idea of value-free sociology, or what has become known as value-free social science. Value-free social science or sociology is that when sociologists go around collecting data, writing reports, generating knowledge about the real world, we should try, or they should try as much as possible to take away their values, their sentiments, their preferences out of the discourse, so that social science becomes what? An objective knowledge, so that everybody will see that this is fair knowledge, this is reasonable, it's scientific and all that. Sociologists should not use their values, their preferences, their sympathies, and color their findings and all that. In that way, we are able to generate scientific knowledge. Now, Weber was also interested in power, politics. Weber asked the question, why is it that some few people govern and others follow? And others follow. So he's interested in how people legitimize their rule, why some people just accept that some people should rule. So he comes back to power and domination. Some people wield power, some people are dominated. And here, Weber recognized that people can be in power and they can be tolerated. But others who can be in power, they will not accept them. So we have legitimate power and illegitimate power. In the affairs of humans throughout history, there have been situations where legitimate power is wielded and also illegitimate power is wielded. Now, illegitimate power is a power that those who are being governed will challenge because it's illegitimate. For example, let's say we are practicing democracy today, and then some military guy takes up arms and challenge and then overthrow the democratic regime and begins to govern. Because we haven't elected that guy into power, his power is illegitimate. So there will always be resentment here and there, people will be challenging. So by the time you are aware, the system collapses. But there are some people who exercise power, and we say it's legitimate, and so we don't challenge. Now, anytime power is legitimate and we don't challenge, it tends to be what Weber calls authority. Authority. So legitimate power is the same as authority. Now, how does Weber define power? Power, he defines very briefly, the ability to dominate others, to have your will, even if they are resisting you. That is power. If you have that ability to dominate others and make them do your will, even when they are resisting, you have power. So if you are in a classroom and I say, I'm having power over you, and I say, this afternoon, you should all fetch buckets of water to my bungalow, I'm sure some of you will be angry. So you throw a challenge to me. Now, if in spite of those resistances you have, I can still compel you to fetch that water, then I have power over you. But if you resist and I have no way to compel you, then I don't have power. So power means the ability of a person or groups of people to have their will prevail, even in the face of resistance. That's how Weber defines power. And I think that is very clear. But throughout history, power has been exercised legitimately. And so Weber came out with 3 patterns of power that is exercised legitimately, or what I would say 3 types of authority. Throughout human history, we've had 3 types of authority, or 3 patterns of authority. The first one is traditional authority. The second one is charismatic authority. The next one, the final one, is rational legal authority. We'll discuss this briefly. Remember, when people exercise authority, the followers obey them. They don't challenge, because what? They are exercising legitimate power. Now, throughout history, many people have lived under traditional authority, whether it's in Europe, China, Africa, you name it. Much of our existence on earth has been under traditional authority. What we call today democracy and all that is a late invention in the whole human history. So long before the Industrial Revolution in Europe, people have lived under traditional authority. Their traditional authority is the kings, the monarchy. So today you talk about the kingdom in France. Of course, but we've learned that French people abolished that, so they don't have that. We learned some time ago that there was a monarchy there. But today, some traditional authorities exist. In Norway, they have a kingdom. Sweden, they have. Britain, they have. Netherlands, they have. All what it means is that before the Industrial Revolution, before industrializing in Europe, people were living under traditional authority. Just like people live under the Asante Hini, or they live under Ochie Hini, or Togbe Afede. This is what we call traditional authority. Traditional authority is stable. It is legitimate. People don't challenge, and of course these days villages, people are challenging, but all things being equal, traditional rulers are not challenged. And then the question is, why do people subscribe to that? Why do people just follow their leaders? And this is the question Weber wants to ask, that what is the source of their legitimacy? What is the source of their legitimacy? And he has an answer to that. In traditional authority, the source of legitimacy is that of traditions date back. Traditions date back. Practices date back to history. So the source of legitimacy for traditional authority is that these are things that have evolved, these patterns of rule have come through many, many years of tradition. So, for example, if you go to Kumasi and you ask an Asante, why do you obey Asante Hini? The likely answer will be that, oh, it has been that way. Finish. That's all. Oh, it has been, that's the way we do it here. So the legitimacy of traditional leaders rests on the sanctity of immemorial traditions and practices, dating back, even they themselves don't remember. So the authority. And one interesting thing about traditional authority is very stable, because all things being equal, if a traditional leader dies, there are rules of succession. Those who come and occupy the authority or the office is well established. So there's continuity, there's predictability in the system and everything. This is one way of describing traditional authority. Now the next one is charismatic authority. Unlike traditional authority, where the system is actually anchored in tradition, long and tested traditions, charismatic authority is not as stable as the previous one I'm talking about. Why do people obey charismatic leaders? It is not because their traditions are there, but they are obeying the charismatic leader because of a personal quality that leader has. So the people just follow, and they may even follow blindly. And charismatic leaders don't come out of tradition, but they emerge in times of crisis. Okay, And then, particularly in situations where there's social crisis, where everybody seems or thinks that society is evolving in a way that they can't have control over. Severe crisis. Then people emerge out of those crises and they promise the group or society that you guys don't worry, we're going to fix it. And so the followers begin to see their leader as somebody who is having supernatural qualities. They heap all kinds of attributes, unnatural attributes on him, that he's like super and all that. Then the person is said to be charismatic. Now, unlike traditional authority, charismatic leadership is unstable because it's a personal attribute. It is not coming from any traditional way of doing things. It just emerged spontaneously. And even when the charismatic leader dies, it is likely we will not find such a person with charisma. So, charismatic leadership, among the three that I will talk about, is the most unstable. And charismatic leaders don't follow rules because there's no laid down rule for the person. So, because we also praising him all the time, he tends to assume some godlike position. So he can do things. He can decide that you follow him, he won't pay you because you are all doing it for a great cause. And so that personal charm, magnetism, is what draws the followers to him. So the followers accept him as their leader, and that is the source of the legitimacy of that authority, charismatic authority. And a good example in history has been the leaders of the great religions of the world. They were charismatic. Jesus Christ is number one. Prophet Muhammad is number two. I'm just setting the example. I'm not saying they are in that order. Jesus Christ was charismatic. Imagine you fishing the whole day and you didn't catch fish. And then somebody just walks to you and say, cast your nets further. And then here you are catching so much fish. What happens? The person has supernatural qualities. So this is how Christ, in a way, became so charismatic. Then people decide that they will become what? Apostles, following him. So Christ was very charismatic. And then we read in the Bible that he healed many people, even raised the dead alive. So such people have special charm, special gift that many people were not accessing. So charismatic leaders are that way. Now, charismatic leaders, because of that, they do things their own way. Okay? But in today's world, we reserve the word charisma for any leader who is, for example, is able to talk. He has the oratory powers. When he talks, crowd can come around. Yes. So we have examples like Kwame Nkrumah, President Kennedy, and of recent times, you remember Rawlings. Rawlings coming to power from the sociological point of view. It's not that Rawlings per se had that charm or naturalistic, but because he came at a time when Ghana was in economic crisis. So everybody, this young officer, became so charismatic that he was going to fix Ghana. All the people who were doing bad were ruining the economy. He was chasing them out. So that led to the death of some of the senior citizens and all that. But you see the youth and workers were praising him because he held a hope that Ghana can turn things round. You see, in those days, because you were not young, let me recount some story for you. J.J. Rawlings was referred to as Junior Jesus. The J.J. was Junior Jesus. So he ruled. And I think these days you even can see some charisma. So the recent defeat of NDC, some were attributing to that. They didn't go to Rawlings to use his charisma again to vote, to appeal to people to vote. And I'm sure maybe if he were joining the John Mahama group, maybe the votes would have come up a bit. But that is charismatic leaders. When they speak, people just follow them because of what? They have this godlike, supreme being attitude towards him. So that is the source of the legitimacy. That's why people accept them. But this leadership is unstable because conditions will change. Junior Jesus may not be able to solve the problem. His charisma may wane. The reasons for coming, he may not be able to solve. So by the time you are aware, charismatic leaders lose their charisma. In the case of Rawlings, a lot of things happened in his time that he wasn't able to solve so many problems. And so people started agitating again against him. And the JJ became what? Junior Judas. That's how, at the time, the people opposing him were describing him now. But it also shows you the limitation of charismatic leadership. For Weber, charismatic leadership is not a stable leadership that can be used to govern society continuously. Apart from the personal problems that the charismatic leader will have, he is likely to introduce so many contradictions in the system because he doesn't normally follow rules. He'll just wake up and say, I want this to be done. And the followers will say, hey, yes, let's do it. I want this to be done. So Rawlings' earlier rule, for example, earlier period was so chaotic. You can just say, I've seen somebody's bank account. Somebody should come and do this. Even though people were supporting, the greater effect for society was that society was becoming unstable, unpredictable. So that is charismatic leadership. Then the final one is the rational legal authority. The rational legal authority is the authority pattern that dominates modernity. So, how does it work? Remember that I was saying that the whole movement from traditional society to the modern one, for Max Weber, is a rationalization process. Rationalization process is that every aspect of our life will be rationalized. Our actions will be rationalized. The organizations we set up in modern society will be rationalized. So rationality will permeate the entire fabric of society. It will show itself in every arena that we work. So is the case with leadership. Leadership will become rational and legal. It will move away from traditional authority, move away from charismatic authority, and all that. So here, for Weber, the modern world is a rational world. It's a world that becomes calculative, the world that wants to achieve goals, the world that is matching ends, the means and goals. So everybody, in a way, you can see, we are becoming increasingly rational in the modernity. Rationality works this way. You want to buy a pair of shoes, you see, maybe if we are talking about the social action we talked about last time, you want to engage in, you want to buy a shoe, pair of shoes, and you go to Makola, maybe your auntie is selling shoes, but you don't go to your auntie. For all you know, your auntie's shoes are expensive. You are not going to say because of affectivity. or because of traditional, so you are going to buy things from her. You are calculating what? Your money. So you want where you can buy the shoe cheapest. So if you get it from any other person, that is a rational action. Weber is saying that increasingly in the modern world, we are being calculative, and this affectivity that will, because it's my auntie, I'll go and buy from her. It doesn't work anymore. So rational society, modern society is a rational society. Actions are goal-oriented. Organizations we set up are goal-oriented. And so the leadership we have in modern society is also it will be rational, legal leadership. Now, what it means is that in a modern society, when people occupy authority, the authority they occupy or the position they occupy is defined by legalities, by rules, by formality. So it's not going to be like, oh, during the traditional times, because somebody should occupy a traditional position, the parents should have occupied that position. It's like ascribed status. Okay? So before you can be a leader in traditional society, you must be born into a royal family before you occupy. So that is ascription. Charismatic leaders emerge spontaneously within socioeconomic crisis. But rational legal authority is one that is created legally through enacted laws. Okay, so for example, in modern society, many of the organizations, from the president's position to parliament to organizational leaders and all that, their position is created legally. And so, if you go there and occupy the position, people accord you all the respect. They don't challenge you because you are exercising rational legal authority. And in the modern society, anybody can occupy those positions. So in the university, for example, we have hierarchical arrangement of positions. So the vice chancellor, for example, is occupying that position because of the legal rules that are specified in the university. So maybe he should be of this age, he should have this qualification, and that's it. It is not because his father was once vice chancellor. Okay, or because of his personal charisma. No. So don't be surprised. You go to many organizations, you will see that the people occupying the highest positions may not even be so huge in size or the tallest in the organization. But there are those people who are qualified. Okay? So you can't say that because Nana Akufo-Addo is short, he can't be president. It doesn't make sense. Because the office is created rationally. It's bound by legal rules. So you can't say because Mahama is taller, he should continue. No. So you see the whole process of leadership at the highest level, the national level, it passes through certain legalities. So the president can be the smallest, but he has what? The ultimate power in Ghana. So legal rational authority is accepted by people because of the legality. So its source of legitimacy is because of the rules that are defining the position, that people pass through certain channels because of qualification, because of experience and all that. So in the modern society, we are going to build many, many organizations, which Weber refers to as bureaucracies. And within bureaucracies, we find many, many levels of rational legal authority. So for example, in the university, when you come to distance education here, you have your dean. He's occupying a legal rational position. And what is interesting about this is that it is not a personal affair. The moment you leave office, you no longer have rational legal authority. So if I'm VC, and after my term of office has expired, I come back, I'm ordinary person. So you see that we have this situation where societies will begin their journey as being governed by traditional authorities. But they are evolving into modernity. Sometimes what happens is that because they are moving into modernity, the rules are they are in transition. When they are in transition, a lot of crises emerge along the way. Then these crisis movements throw up charismatic leaders. But once society moves further into modernity, they tend to incorporate rational legal authorities here and there. So everything stabilizes again. So you see that what Weber is trying to say is that in terms of evolution of authority, we are likely to pass through traditional authority. We may experience charismatic authority along the way, and then finally in the modern times, we will have rational legal authority. So this also expresses his movement away from traditionalism to rational state. I'll now go to the next slide.